This is your Tuesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back with you guys for another day and a great show coming up. It's going to be pretty NFL heavy. That's how Tuesdays are going to go here a lot during the NFL season. Andrew Krammer from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a few minutes for a film review of Sunday's game. What went wrong on the offensive line in particular that didn't give the Vikings enough room to run in particular and had Kirk Cousins under duress on some key plays? It's a familiar refrain. Had chances to upgrade the offensive line in the offseason, decided to go with continuity, and I'm not sure that was the right decision. And also the defense, which was improved to a degree, but still gave up some points when it matters most. I put most of that loss on the offense, but still a look at the defense, some different things that Brian Flores did as opposed to Ed Donatel last year, and maybe where other teams might try to counterattack those things, having seen now what Flores will do with this defense. So Andrew and I will break that all down. Also have some award-winning Vikings poetry back for another season, and we'll get to that after Andrew as well. Just a fun way to recap the 20-17 loss to the Buccaneers in a short week. Of course, Vikings play at Philadelphia in just 2 nights, so there'll be an Access Vikings podcast probably later today, spinning ahead to that. So football. Probably a good time to mention, too, that tomorrow's show will be Gopher football heavy. Randy Johnson expected to join me ahead of that game in North Carolina on Saturday. A big one. One I'm excited for because I'm going to be there. Visiting friends, visiting with friends, visiting my good friend Keith, who actually is the co-conspirator on the poetry section of this podcast in just a little while. Some Twins thoughts at the end of the show. First, though, what did I miss? Big story from Monday. Aaron Rodgers injured early in his Jets debut on Monday Night Football. They called it an ankle injury initially, but then started to say no, probably an Achilles injury. And if it's a bad Achilles injury, that is going to be very bad for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. Could be bad enough that it keeps him out for the rest of the season. And a guy who's 39 right now, almost 40, you're starting to talk about questions about whether that could have been his last snap of his career. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We don't know the full diagnosis yet. There's a lot of Twitter diagnosis going on based on what happened to his left leg on that play early in the game. Now, the Jets did manage to rally and win in overtime, not so much behind Zach Wilson, the former high draft pick who's now thrust back into the spotlight. He did okay managing the game, but if they have to turn it back over to him for the rest of the season, that is going to be an interesting proposition for them. Again, such an off-season story, the off-season drama of Aaron Rodgers. Will he stay in Green Bay? Will he get traded? The whole off-season of him in New York, going to all these events in New York, making himself kind of the face of the city, and then I think it was the 4th play from scrimmage for the Jets in his much-anticipated debut, Monday Night Football. He gets hurt, and we'll wait for the full diagnosis, but some cautionary tales in all of this, I would think. And one reason, perhaps, the Packers, even if they don't have any love for Aaron Rodgers anymore, should be rooting for his speedy recovery. That being, they get a first-round pick in 2024 if he plays 65% of the snaps this season. That seemed to be a slam dunk as long as he wasn't injured. Well, first game of the season, he's injured. If he misses 6 or 7 games, he's not going to play 65% of the snaps for the Jets this season. That pick would be a second-round pick, still value, but not nearly as valuable as a potential first-round pick would be from the Jets. So that's a reason the Packers should be holding out hope that he is healthy. Another cautionary tale, too, is, we maybe have this misinterpretation of Rodgers of being not as durable. But he had played, aside from missing a game with COVID a couple of years ago, I think he'd played, I was looking this up earlier, he had played every game, he had made every start in 8 of the past 9 seasons for the Packers. The lone exception, of course, being 2017 when he was knocked to the ground by Anthony Barr against the Vikings and missed the last 9 games of that year as the Vikings took control of the division race. So that piece of it was, pretty interesting that he, we have this idea that he's not durable. He was very durable, including the last 5 years with the Packers, making all the starts except for the missed game with COVID. But, like I said, he's almost 40. Those soft tissues, take it from me, or take it from Aaron Rodgers. Those soft tissues, as you get older, and I'm, 6-7 years older than Aaron Rodgers, they do not rebound the way they used to. And this was a risk by the Jets. Imagine if when the Vikings got Brett Favre, and Brett Favre had a much greater legacy of durability, but Aaron Rodgers not that far behind in terms of how much he's actually played. Imagine if Brett Favre had been injured in the first game of that Vikings year in 2009, how disappointing, how deflating it would have been to go right back to the old quarterback situation, to the wondering if you were going to be able to score enough points to win with what you'd hoped was a good defense. And the Jets still have a very good defense. They could still be okay this season, but that piece of it to me is very interesting that, that we're talking about now. A guy who, approaching 40, this was a risk that we didn't really talk about. The other thing we didn't really talk about is apparently in mid-August, he clutched his left calf during a practice. I was reading back on this. Now I think he hurt his right calf during OTAs in May. So this is not the same calf he apparently tweaked in May. But in August, a little less than a month ago, he was clutching his left calf, and the calf strain is directly related sometimes to the Achilles problems. If there's weakness in the calf that puts strain on the Achilles, I think we saw that with Kevin Durant a couple of years ago with Golden State. We know all about calf strains from Karl Anthony Towns last year with the Timberwolves, but if that was a precursor to this, if he played through something that seemed minor and then came away with this major injury, that will be an interesting narrative to follow. But the biggest thing, Aaron Rodgers out, and probably out for the foreseeable future. We'll find out more today, but tough blow for the Jets. You don't want to see anybody get hurt. I've obviously talked about Aaron Rodgers a lot over the years. I've got feelings about him as a person that have evolved over time. I think he's an amazing quarterback, though I wanted to see what he would do with the Jets this season, and we might be deprived of a pretty interesting story if this is indeed an injury that requires a lot of time to heal. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But, for a Vikings fan, this is one more point too. Kirk Cousins has been awfully durable. I know Rodgers has been pretty durable. Kirk Cousins hasn't missed a start due to injury since 2015. It is nice to have that. It's nice to have somebody you can count on from an injury standpoint, someone who, is still not 40. He's about to be 30. He's 35, but he's not 40. That's different. And someone like that, they know they can count on, as opposed to either a rookie or a young quarterback like Zach Wilson or an aging veteran like Aaron Rodgers. He does fall into the middle ground in good or bad, and this is a case where you probably are happy you have the durability of the quarterback on your side if you are the Vikings.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Got Andrew Krammer with me. I'm excited. We're back into kind of back in the swing of the NFL season. A weird week for a lot of us, Andrew, just because of the Thursday night game. But this segment will regularly appear on Tuesdays, a little film review of what we saw, rewinding what happened in the Vikings games. And these were overwhelmingly positive last year, Andrew. They won 13 of their 17 games. And usually when we got to this point, it was like, okay, there were some flaws, but they overcame them. So here's kind of what they can improve on. Here's what they can fix as they try to get better, but they're still winning. That was not the case Sunday, Andrew. They lose 20-17 to Tampa Bay. the mistakes that, some of them were familiar, which we'll get into here in a minute. Some of the familiar mistakes, they couldn't overcome them. The turnovers obviously were huge, probably the biggest part of the game. If they win the turnover battle or at least hold it even, I think they win that game, reasonably comfortably, but they didn't. And now they're staring down, a short week against the defending NFC champs with the possibility of going 0-2. And beyond that, Andrew, some of the familiar kind of signal flares, alarm bells, whatever we want to call them, they're still there, starting with the offensive line from what you could see in watching and rewatching the game.
Yeah, remember last year they started that O-line, they started the first 10 games together. Yeah. And that was a lot of the credit to, at least coaches gave that a lot of credit to why the offense was so prolific, why the running game was at least mediocre before the injuries started piling up. And now they've already got him. Garrett Bradbury, chronic back issue. That's popping up again. 7 snaps into the game. He's limping off with a lower back issue. He missed 5 games with the lower back issue last year. Christian Darrisaw, to his credit, gutted through an ankle injury, but he wasn't the same player. While he was doing that, he was giving up some pressures in that second half, which is just not obviously like him.
Right.
And you've got O'Neal coming off the Achilles, looking like a guy who was very much knocking the rust off. And not necessarily being the same player or up to that standard that we're used to. And once you focus on the interior line, you could tell Todd Bowles, the Buccaneers head coach, was very focused on the Vikings interior line because that's where a lot of their pressures were focused. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers under Bowles love to blitz, much like the Vikings did on the other side of the ball. And Kirk, to his credit in the first half, was very good against it, but it eventually caved in and just wasn't as effective in the second half. And it's Ed Ingram not taking that step forward that coaches kept talking about. It's Ezra Cleveland blowing a block on Devin White on a tight end screen, one of the many tight end screens that ended up in a loss.
Don't get me started.
And then your backup center, Austin Schlottman, is a backup for a reason. He's not going to live up to that starter caliber player, and they need the players around him to help, and they don't have that. Their interior 3 remains an incredible weak link. And now without Bradbury in there, it's even more glaring. And Kevin O'Connell said all offseason that we've got ways to help our offensive line. We understand that this is something that we're going to have to work around. And I just didn't see the answers on Sunday. This offense scored 17 points against a Buccaneers defense that gave up 29 passing touchdowns last year. Many of these guys returning this year. And they made that defense in Tampa Bay, in your own home at US Bank, look pretty good. And that's just not how this Vikings offense should be. They're loaded from TJ Hawkinson to Addison to Justin Jefferson. These guys are among the most talented skill group in the league. But when you can't control the line of scrimmage like they still can't, this is what happens. And we talk ad nauseum about the effects that has on Kirk. And I'm sure it's in his head, whether he wants to admit it or not publicly, that especially when you're hurting in the third, fourth quarter, that ball's going to come out quicker. You're going to miss open guys. And I think we saw some of that as well.
It's the frustrating thing is that this has been a deficiency for a while, the interior of the line, at least. It feels like they've figured out tackle, although, like you said, O'Neal looked a little bit rusty and coming off the Achilles, and Darrisaw was limited by that ankle, and we'll see how he is for this kind of short week turnaround against the Philadelphia Eagles, who, oh, by the way, will probably bring some pressure on Thursday night on their home field in prime time. But the interior of the line, they paid some lip service to this offseason saying, hey, these are guys that can still get better. We've got ways to help them. They didn't really change any personnel, though. They brought in, was it Dalton Reisner for a look, the guard. They kind of thought about different things, but ultimately stayed in the same place. And it looks already like more of the same. How is, where do they go from there, I guess? Because, if you look at it and say it's kind of more of the same in week 1, you don't just say, well, everything they thought in the offseason has to go out the window, but it's not a comforting thing to think that they haven't solved this problem.
Well, and really how they wanted to balance this offense out was with the running game, right? And it's really hard to do that when Alexander Mattison he's a power back. He's somebody who will run over a safety when that one guy is left for him in the hole. But when you're getting hit by a defensive lineman 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, this is the stuff we saw with Cook last year when the O-line started getting banged up in November and December. The run game really disappeared at the end of last year, and I think it's directly tied to the offensive line not being the same. Darisaw missed time with a concussion. Bradbury missed time with that back injury. That's still an issue, even though he practiced all summer without it being an issue. So their counterpunch to get pressure off of Kirk, not only pressure from him having to carry the team, but literal pass rush, was to hand the ball off. And they were not able to do that. There was an 8-yard run to start the game, looked promising, and that was with Bradbury in the game. And then when Bradbury left after 7 snaps, they couldn't get any of that going. And then Darisaw gets hurt and the issues just kind of roll downhill. And so to me, the most concerning part, if you're the Vikings, is, okay, we wanted to take this next step as an offense. We bring in and re-sign Hawkinson, and you bring in Addison to then add even more to that passing game. Well, the issues are still up front, right in front of Kirk, in terms of they still can't run the ball. 11 carries for 34 yards for Alexander Mattison. Ty Chandler chips in 3 carries for 0 yards. Their screen game didn't look like it was anywhere near acceptable.
No.
Chandler did have 1 catch and run for 18 yards, and maybe there's something there on the perimeter that they can get going. But in general, I think O'Connell needs to find or deploy. He's probably got these answers in his playbook, whether he went to them or not, that they got to find ways to get that quick game going, get that pressure off, because what they want to do is they want to run the ball and they want to set up play action. They want to try and do those deep shots with Jefferson and the post and the corners, the goes. They want to do those vertical routes off of Kirk running the bootlegs. This is still a Rams kind of centric based offense. That is the roots of where Kevin O'Connell is from and what he learned and what they've installed. But too much of it's just gone back on, well, why would the Buccaneers or any defense have to drop back into coverage if they know they can go 5-6 wide at the line of scrimmage, attack the edges, pin down those bootlegs, and really take away your passing game? Because they know if we put 3 or 4 guys in the middle of that defense, you're not going to run against us because you can't block.
Yeah, and I thought Madison did an okay job, like turning what could have been 2-yard losses into 2-yard gains. And I'm just like kind of looking at his whole game log. Like he had 11 carries. He had the goal line carry. We got knocked back for 3 yards. That wasn't good. Of the other 10 carries, though, 9 went for at least 2 yards. So he wasn't putting them in terribly negative situations, which is one of the things they did want from him. But you don't have that kind of, what you don't get from him is that kind of home run threat that Dalvin Cook used to have. Like Alexander Madison's probably not going to run for 60 yards on a play. He might, his chunk plays might be 20 or 25 yards, but he's not got that breakaway speed. So if you don't have that and you're still kind of limited in, establishing what he is good at, that's problematic, because then you're right. Then it just leads to tee off on Kirk Cousins, like always.
Yeah, and to Alex's credit, he's a very powerful back. You saw it on the swing pass for the touchdown. Yes. He powers through 2 Buccaneers defenders there. That's where he's at his best, when you can get him in space and have him run over smaller guys. What he can't do, and what a younger Dalvin Cook did, and Dalvin Cook didn't do this much last year, but when Dalvin's quick feet were as quick as they've ever been, he could dodge defensive linemen that were in the backfield. He could weave his way inside. I saw this with Jahmyr Gibbs on Thursday night with the Detroit Chiefs game. He was able to make some guys miss with that quickness that we haven't seen from the Vikings backfield from a 27-year-old Dalvin Cook last year, who had a lot of carries and a lot of mileage. And Madison doesn't have that mileage, but he's also not that back. Yeah. He's the guy who needs a hole, needs a lane, and then can at least fall forward and get you some extra yardage once he gets to the second level. This offensive line was not getting him to the second level very often. And so his power, his falling forward, as they say, needed to be from like the line of scrimmage for 2 yards, as you mentioned. And so that's just the headache that the Vikings have to deal with right now, is that if they can't open up lanes, this offense remains incredibly one-dimensional.
Yeah, let's transition to the defense in a minute. But like, as you think about short week, preparing for Philadelphia, trying to either fix some of these things or preparing for Philadelphia to say, okay, I see what happened. I see what worked against you. We're going to do the same thing. Like, what's the chess match now? What can they do better against inarguably a much better opponent?
Yeah, I mean, Mac Jones somehow managed to throw for over 300 yards yesterday against this Philadelphia defense. Now, there was a lot of pressure on him. The Patriots obviously didn't win that game, but they had a chance that no one was really giving them a chance to win that game. So I think you got to look and take a page out of their book a little bit of how were they able to push the ball downfield. The Patriots were missing two of their starting guards in that game. So no excuses because the Patriots offensive line was also ravaged and they were able to at least push the ball downfield a little bit. They've got a better running game than the Vikings have had under Kevin O'Connell. I think this Eagles secondary looked vulnerable, but the Buccaneers secondary is also vulnerable. And we saw that Kirk threw for 350 yards.
Yeah.
They just didn't get into the end zone. Justin Jefferson didn't score a touchdown. Addison had that lone touchdown for them, as well as Madison. I think when you go into Philadelphia on a short week, you got to hope that you can get some big plays. This is not an offense that you should be banking on. We're going to, march down the field in 10, 15 play drives because we can be that consistent in the short game. They need to spring Hawkinson loose, Jefferson loose. They need to try to find that home run threat in the passing game and at least get some quick and cheap and easy scores because right now it's looking pretty hard for them to move the ball.
Defensively, they held Tampa Bay to basically nothing on the first 6 drives. I mean, they didn't get a turnover. I think they only had 1 sack, but in terms of pressure, confusion, holding them down, I mean, 3 of the points were directly from that strip sack by Winfield that got them the ball deep in Vikings territory, and the Vikings held there. They gave up, obviously, the touchdowns kind of sandwiched around the end of the second, early third quarter, and then the long field goal. But 20 points usually will probably win them games in terms of what they give up. It didn't in this case. What did you see when you went back and looked at the debut of Brian Flores calling plays and running this defense?
Yeah, the blitzing was as advertised. I went back and double checked, and the Vikings blitzed on 21% of their plays under Ed Donatel last year. And that number, according to ESPN, was 47%.
That's huge, yeah.
On Sunday. And that was more than double. Harrison Smith blitzed 6 times by himself. He had just 13 pass rushes last year.
Yeah.
The entire season. So they're getting these guys involved at the line of scrimmage. The first half, it certainly worked. Baker Mayfield was 1 of 6 for 6 yards against the blitz in the first half. The Bucs were trying to run the ball and push the ball downfield, and that wasn't working. And what Todd Bowles and that staff did was adjust that quite a bit at halftime, and the Vikings did not seem ready for it. After halftime, it was a lot quicker throws, a lot of quick outs, little hooks and stuff like that. Finding the outlet in the flat, the screen game for the Buccaneers was working a lot better than it was working for the Vikings. They should have probably even had another touchdown to Evans on a kind of quick slant that he just dropped when Caleb Evans was playing really off coverage. And what stood out to me was they could get the pressure in the first half when they had some time. When they didn't have the time in the second half, they still lined up everybody at the line of scrimmage, showed 7. They often dropped and only rushed 4, rushed 3. It did lead to some confusion for Tampa Bay where they didn't know who to block, and then you would get some quick pressures. But when you didn't, it was too easy to throw against the off coverage. That says to me that this coaching staff wasn't ready to put a very young secondary, a very young cornerback group in press man coverage. I didn't see a whole lot of that. I didn't see a whole lot of challenging receivers at the line. And these are very good receivers, obviously.
Sure.
But you've got very good receivers on Thursday night, too. And are you going to be able to trust them to challenge A.J. Brown, challenge Devonta Smith? If not, we might be looking at a lot of the same stuff if Flores still wants to pressure a Jalen Hurts as much as he did at Baker Mayfield. Now, maybe their game plan changes. Maybe they back everybody up a little bit this time around. Maybe Marcus Davenport actually plays this game and gives them part of that 4-man rush that he couldn't give them because he was out on Sunday. To me, what stood out was just the coaching decision to kind of spread your defense out and give the Buccaneers kind of that 5 to 10 yard range of just kind of easy completions. And we saw that on the final play of the game, the last play that the Vikings had a chance on, when Godwin catches that 11-yarder on the sideline on 3rd and 10, you needed to stop. They didn't get it because Mekhi Blackmon and Harrison Smith were so far back that they couldn't close out and try to get to the sticks and get their guy. And I talked to Blackmon after the game. it looked like Blackman was man-to-man because he was the one lined up across from Godwin. He said, no, I was actually playing the second guy inside thinking he was going to go deep on us. We were not expecting the number one receiver, meaning Godwin, to run that kind of a quick out route. So whether it caught the coordinator off guard, it certainly caught the players off guard. They just looked like they weren't prepared for Tampa making that adjustment. And then throughout the second half, weren't really able to counter it because 12 of the 16 first downs for Tampa Bay came in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't, they still didn't wind up with more than 250 yards, but they got the touchdowns when they needed them.
It was ball control, though. They were just able to keep the ball away from Minnesota, which led to why the Vikings couldn't put up more than 17 points, in part because as well with the protection issues.
Yeah, I mean, because they punted with like 4 minutes left and Tampa Bay never gave them the ball back. If they at least get a stop, if they get an incompletion on that ball to Godwin, it's probably either going to be a long field goal or a punt, and they're going to have almost 2 minutes to try to go tie and win. And instead, that's kind of the ball game, maybe kind of underscoring that the defense is improved, but maybe when push comes to shove, it's not all the way there yet. I mean, as you think about, let's finish here. Like we talked about, they got Jalen Hurts and these good receivers on Thursday night, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, and two of the next 3 games after that. It doesn't get any easier. It gets a lot harder than Baker Mayfield, although, Tampa Bay obviously has good receivers, but it's going to get a lot harder for, frankly, for the Vikings offense and the Vikings defense. And maybe that's the most alarming thing outside of a 20-17 outcome is that not only did you lose a game you expected to win, you lost a game, and now you've got a lot of questions coming up against some much better teams.
Yeah, and the Vikings youth in that secondary we're talking about, they had a lot of ups and downs. Like Josh Mattel has played a lot. He was their nickel back, essentially. He was the 5th defensive back when they played the pass. He had a great deflection on one pass, and then he gives up a 28-yard touchdown to Mike Evans on another. You had Blackman's up and downs where we mentioned the play there late. Harrison Smith not being able to get over there. We forget he's 34 years old.
Yeah.
And then Caleb Evans, I thought he played well in terms of his physicality, his tackling, but he wasn't really challenged too much outside of playing some decent reps against Mike Evans. So I want to see, can this young secondary hold up once they're challenged more by a veteran quarterback who is going to throw at them, where Mayfield seemed like he was just trying to take what the defense was giving him a little bit and wasn't too much on the attack. Like you mentioned, just 250 yards for Tampa, 150 of which came after halftime. They weren't prolific by any means. And so these offenses are going to get a lot tougher to face once that quarterback says, you know what? I like Mike Williams against Caleb Evans. I like Travis Kelce over the middle against Ivan Pace or whoever it's going to be. I do think that these quarterbacks are going to try to pick these guys apart a little bit more than what we saw, which is obviously the scary part and is going to challenge Brian Flores. And with Jalen Hurts, I don't know what you do because it would be very NFL if the Vikings somehow managed to make this a game after losing to Tampa Bay. But at the same time, I don't think the Vikings are a very good run-stopping team because I don't think Tampa's a good rushing offense. No. I think that was just kind of two bad sides meeting there. But Philadelphia is an elite rushing offense with Jalen Hurts. And I do wonder how the Vikings are going to be able to manage that because in part why the Patriots were in that game against Philadelphia was because New England has a very, very good defensive front. New England's defense is very underrated, and they were able to at least hold the line of scrimmage in a way that I don't see Harrison Phillips, Dean Lowry, Jonathan Bullard. I don't see those guys doing that against Philly's offensive line. It could be a long night.
Where were the top 3 defensive picks they had from 2022? Seen, Booth, and Asamoah. Where are those guys?
Man, Scene made one of the worst mistakes and it wasn't even on defense. He's on special teams. He's on the field goal block there on the 57-yarder at the end of the game. And I went back and looked at this. He wasn't on the initial field goal block team in the first quarter on the other field goal. This was a different field goal block team that must have been playing for the fake, maybe, because I think it was like 4th and 3.
Yeah, and then it was it was long too. It was 57 yards. So
so maybe they were worried about the fake, so they put an extra defensive back out there who was Lewis Seen. And then all of a sudden, Cam Bynum crosses his face to go to the other side. And I don't know if he thought Cam was like late coming onto the field. Seen just left. He just bolted to the sideline, and immediately Jordan Hicks, Jay Ward, all the teammates just throw their arms up like, what are you doing?
Oh, no.
And the Vikings had to burn a timeout before that field goal because Lewis Cine just abandoned and left them with 10 guys on the field. That then leads you to helping Tampa Bay burn the clock out. So that's where Lewis Cine was. Andrew Booth wasn't on the field outside of special teams. Brian Asamoah got 2 snaps, getting outplayed by Ivan Pace. I shouldn't even say that. Asamoah, as it should be pronounced.
Right, yes.
Didn't get a chance. He got just 2 reps. And Kevin O'Connell was asked after the game about that. And O'Connell said, Ivan earned the right to be on the field. Now, O'Connell's not the one making that decision. That's a rotation decision by Flores. Mike Saravo is linebackers coach. So they're the ones that could truly answer for that. But yeah, they went with Ivan Pace and didn't let up. And to the coach's credit, and Ivan's, he actually played pretty well outside of the very end, the third down conversion before the final third down conversion, where Baker scrambles for a first down on like 3rd and 4, and Pace seemed to have had a shot at like leveling him, but instead kind of lets up and tries to grab him around the shoulders, and that allows Mayfield to kind of cut in for the first down. That seemed like kind of a rookie mistake there. Maybe he was worried about a helmet to helmet hit on a quarterback. I don't know. But either way, the young guys had their lumps, and then, as you mentioned, the 2022 draft class couldn't even get on the field.
Got 2 snaps between the 3 of them. That's not good. Kwesi, not good. Kwesi. We'll see, though. Andrew, appreciate it as always. We'll do this again. I don't know if we'll do it next week or not. Maybe we will kind of have some time to digest that Philly game and get ready for the next one. But appreciate it as always, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks.
Good stuff from Andrew, and I just think this is going to be a tough matchup against the Eagles. I mean, that's pretty obvious since that's the team that went to the Super Bowl last year, but this is a team that gives the Vikings a lot of looks that they probably will struggle with. They, stopping the run against a good running team led by a running physical, dual threat quarterback. The Eagles have plenty of weapons on a wide receiver, and on the other side of the ball, they're going to really stress the Vikings up front, especially if Garrett Bradbury and Christian Darrisaw. It sounds like Bradbury is going to be out almost certainly. Darrisaw would be limited in practice. If those guys can't go, or if Darrisaw is not looking great, it's going to be a long night. They're going to have to figure out ways to move the pocket to get, like Andrew said, some of those cheap, quick scores, because I don't think they're going to be able to sustain drives against Philadelphia. But the risk-reward with that is you can get a lot of 3-and-outs if you're going for big plays. So I'll be watching for that on Thursday, and good stuff as usual from Andrew. Back for another season of one of the most talked about segments on Daily Delivery, Vikings Poetry with my good friend Keith Rashad. Vaikus, we call these. The only way to properly express how we and you feel, Keith, about these games is through the artistic expression of poetry.
That's absolutely right. Let me just tell you, I am so excited to be back for the least popular segment on your podcast.
It's not the least popular. I framed it as one of the most talked about segments on this show. So
look, we've known each other for about 35 years now. Right?
Yes, that's true. That's actually true.
which means that you know full well that I am in no way, shape, or form bothered by the fact that nobody likes this segment.
No, you actually enjoy it. You kind of relish in you'll take any feedback, but especially the negative. It just drives you. It fuels your art, I think. You and Taylor Swift. You just the haters are just fueling your craft.
Yeah, it just cracks me up to think that there's somebody out there sitting there thinking, well, this guy doesn't know anything about football. He just writes poetry. What does he do? He doesn't crunch the all 22 film like I do, like a normal, reasonable human being. No. I like that.
But I will say that when I asked for feedback on this show, several months ago, this specific segment got brought up many times, sometimes in the context of, man, I wish you wouldn't do that, but sometimes in the context of, hey, I really like that. I look forward to that every week. So it is in this business, if you have something that's kind of quote unquote sticky like that, that's memorable, we got to keep doing it. Plus you're my really good friend, so I want to keep doing it.
Well, all right, let's do the first haiku.
Okay, what do you got?
The season's first week is always the stupidest, just like the Vikings.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. when we did this, we've done this all 3 years now. The first year it was a longer segment. Last year we kind of truncated it down to just the poetry. But last year it was overwhelmingly positive, right? Like, it was, even in the first week they went out and trounced the Packers last year. It was like 23-7 or something like that. It was an easy breezy kind of win. And there just wasn't a whole lot of, not a lot we could take the scalpel to last year, even as they were kind of just escaping. But your larger point being, week one, you maybe you try not to take too much away from that. Are you giving them a little bit of grace here with that poem?
Well, I have long held and truly believe that you cannot tell anything about the NFL season from the first week. It is always the strangest and silliest week of the year, and particularly nowadays when teams seem to treat the preseason games as nothing, right? So your starters don't even see the field. It's kind of like college football nowadays, right? Where everybody just starts and it's crazy for a little while everybody gets their feet under them. And it's part of the reason why perhaps that, say, PJ Flex teams are always look terrible for the first few weeks and then seem to get stronger as the season goes along. And so you really just cannot tell anything from this first week. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And we'll see where this season goes, which gets into haiku number 2.
Well, let's just go right to it, because I think we made our point on that one.
A sea of despair. Dare we let ourselves still hope? Burn it to the ground.
Yeah. I mean, this is the duality that I face all the time of reaction. What's the proper level of reaction? Like, and in baseball or the NBA, like, if you treat every game like it's fire and brimstone, like you're going to weigh yourself out. But the NFL, like, even if you shouldn't, or even if you should take a step back and say, all right, it's just one game. If they don't do the stupid turnovers, if Ed Ingram doesn't accidentally knock the ball out of Kirk Cousins' hand, if they don't have the interception at the end of the first half, they probably win that game. And even if they win it kind of ugly, versus, hey, like, you lose a game like this, it's going to be infinitely harder, demonstrably harder to make the playoffs, because this was a win this was a game you were imagining banking in the win column. I think Tampa Bay is not terrible, but they're definitely rebuilding. They were a bad division winner last year. They've replaced a Hall of Fame quarterback with Baker Mayfield. Like, this is a game you expect to win. So when you lose a game like that, I'd say if your playoff odds at the start of the game were maybe a coin flip or a little bit better, all of a sudden they're probably down to like 25 or 30% with just one loss. So
last year we called it the season of whimsy, right?
Yes.
Because it was just silliness and crazy wins and all this fun, goofy stuff that you were talking about after the first Vaiku. Okay, but you tell me this. What on this team from last year has been fixed? Name one single thing about the deficiencies from last year's team that has been fixed.
They fixed one thing. I will give you the one thing. Okay. They changed their defensive coordinator.
And to what avail, right? I mean,
the defense was better in this game against Tampa Bay. I don't know what they're going to be for the course of the year, and I don't know if they have the personnel to be better, but they looked more competent on defense against, admittedly, a bad offensive team. But the personnel, they have upgraded nowhere, unless you think Jordan Addison is a significant upgrade over Adam Thielen, which, at this stage of career, he's at least a different kind of receiver. And they have TJ Hawkinson for the whole year, but the offensive line is completely the same. The defense has, nobody they have Danielle Hunter and a bunch of guys who are kind of spare parts. You're right. They have not upgraded, I don't think, in any real area outside, I would argue, of defensive coordinator.
So burn it to the ground.
Yep.
So fire Brian Flores.
Yeah.
Bring back Ed Donatel.
Wow.
Demote Kevin O'Connell to offensive line coach.
Wow.
Right. Trade Kirk Cousins.
Okay.
Right. Trade Jordan Addison.
Yeah.
Okay. Trade TJ Hawkins.
Yeah.
Cut
what'd you call
6
him?
offensive
What did you call
linemen.
him?
TJ Hawkinson?
I thought you called him TJ Hawkins. Okay, go on.
Okay. How dare you, sir? I've never messed up anybody's
Go on. You're
name
on a roll.
this
You're on a
podcast.
roll. Go on. You're on a roll.
And I am increasingly convinced of the fact that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is going to be really, really good at his second job.
Yeah.
Right? He's working out the kinks on this one. He's making the mistakes. He's trying things out. He's getting his feet wet. And I think he's really going to learn from it and really be great at that second job.
Well, Andrew and I talked about on the film review just a minute ago that the top 3 picks they spent on defensive players last year, Lewis Seen, Andrew Booth Jr., and Brian Asamoah. They played Asamoah. That's how we're pronouncing it now. They played a combined 2 defensive snaps on Sunday, even though they were all presumably healthy for the game. So that's not great. That's not maybe great drafting to this point, although they have a lot of really cool undrafted free agents. So we're happy for them.
Yeah, really happy about that. Right?
Okay.
Going to be great at that second job. Yep. I have real faith in him.
Go on. Like Q3, please.
All right. Lots of turnovers. Blame for all except JJ. Truly offensive.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, here's the thing. They played kind of at this level in a lot of games last year, and they still won. The difference in this game is probably boils down to the turnovers. They lose the turnover battle 3-0. One of those turnovers is deep in their own territory, leads directly to points. 2 of them are in Tampa Bay territory and take points off the board. Like, if you hold serve or even a -1 in turnovers, you probably win this game by like 4 or 7, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, the offense has got to get better. Yeah, this, yeah, that. But it's kind of like last year where it gets sugar-coated and you're still winning.
If one of your offensive linemen strip sacks your quarterback,
that's bad.
That's not what you want.
Not the desired outcome. Team. No, not and Ed Ingram is a problem. Speaking of the things that they didn't fix, they had every opportunity to say, you know what? Also, by the way, second round pick from Kwesi's first draft. You have every opportunity to upgrade here, and you didn't. And so maybe year 2 of Ed Ingram is not this leap forward that they hoped. But yeah, you're right. We hadn't seen him do a strip sack yet, so that was something he added in the offseason, I guess.
Yeah, that was something new. Yeah, exactly.
If you're looking for upgrades, he's now strip sacking his own quarterback.
And getting back essentially to the earlier point that you were making, yes, the one upgrade they made was at defensive coordinator. And so, yeah, they looked functional on defense, or at least not atrocious like last year.
Interesting. They at least made it hard for Tampa Bay to know what they were doing.
But then that clearly and obviously means that it was the offense that lost this game.
It was. I agree. Yes, it was.
With the turnovers and the still just awful offensive line. And so we know where the blame lies really for this particular game.
We do. I agree. Burn it all down. What's your last one?
It's embarrassing. Billion-dollar industry. Fix your stupid app.
You've complained about the app before, but you didn't get to watch this game the way you wanted to watch it, because usually you watch like the condensed 45-minute version, but you're telling me this was not available in week 1?
Well, so they usually, last year, once they finally got it fixed, they had the 45-minute version pretty much right as soon as the game was done, so you could watch it right away.
Yeah.
And then this year, I opened up the app, and it happened to be about 4 hours after the game when I could finally sit down and try to watch the game.
Yeah.
And in the past, the 45-minute cut was usually somewhere from 2 to 4 hours after, right? They took some time to edit it.
Yeah.
Whatever. Okay. Who cares? 4 hours after the game, I open it up and I can't access the 45-minute version. And so then I had my late night old man hockey game, and I had found out that they had lost, but I was still going to watch it anyway because I have that level of dedication
to this segment,
podcast segment.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was going to watch it anyway. And it's like close to midnight, and I still can't access this thing that's supposed to be ready in 2 to 4 hours after the game. And I hate that we have to tolerate the incompetence from this stupid billion-dollar league because they happen to be football. Just drives me nuts. And I'm not going to go too much on a rant on this, because last time you cut me off and you wouldn't let me speak truth to power. So I won't go too crazy about this one, but it just drives me nuts. Just make your app work, you stupid league.
Yeah, that would be frustrating. I mean, not as frustrating as watching all 3 hours live as I did, but is it available yet? I hope they get this smoothed out for your sake. Now,
well, look, man, I don't know if it's available yet because I'm not going to know because I am not watching this game.
The segment's done. It's what's done is done. Now, Thursday's game is on Amazon Prime Video for your pleasure. So I don't know how that's going to work for you in your app, but I don't know how that's going to work for you.
Well, like most people, I've got the stupid Amazon Prime, so I'll probably sit and watch that dumb game, even though it's you know what, the best part is probably be over at halftime, so I can get some sleep anyway.
And then burn it all down if they lose. Don't overreact to week 1, but if they lose 4 days later, feel free to overreact. Hope you enjoyed that segment, and if you didn't, probably won't be a Vaiku this week because of the weird schedule of the week, and I'll be in North Carolina for a few days. That's a good programming note, too. On Monday next week, it's kind of a coincidence, but Royce is out, and I'm going to plan on doing kind of an all Gophers podcast off of that game in North Carolina that I'll be at with a bunch of my friends. So different kind of show next Monday. Plan accordingly. Please still listen, even if our favorite and your favorite Patrick Royce's not on. It should be a fun show. Probably get some of the atmosphere and environment from North Carolina in there, things like that. So that will be Monday next week as we kind of deal with a weird week with the Vikings playing on Thursday and Patrick being unavailable next week. And let's finish with the cooler quick. Twins lose to Tampa Bay. Guardians also lost, so the division lead still looks very good. Only concern I have is the Twins, against good competition this season. They've been a little bit up and down. They have not beaten Tampa Bay in 4 tries this year. It would be nice to get one of these next ones to feel a little bit better about yourself. The biggest thing these last 2 games have underscored, I know it's against 2 pretty different opponents, but Pablo Lopez against the Mets was absolutely dominant on Sunday. Sonny Gray battled his butt off in this game, but he needed 89 pitches to get through 4 innings against Tampa Bay. Only gave up 2 runs, gave the Twins a chance. It was more the bullpen's fault in 7-4 loss than it was Sonny Gray. But this underscores to me the difference that Patrick and I talked about Monday between Sonny Gray and Pablo Lopez. Pablo Lopez looks like he can go 7 or 8 innings against anybody on any given night. Sonny Gray might give you 6, but he might give you 4 or 5. That's a much better guy to have starting game 2 rather than game 1. So I want Pablo Lopez, if I'm the Twins, as my game 1 starter, Sonny Gray as my game 2 starter, and then all hands on deck if there's a game 3, a deciding game 3 in a playoff series in that first round. So that's my opinion on that. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Tuesday. Randy Johnson expected to join me on tomorrow's show for some Gopher football talk, setting up that North Carolina game, looking back on that Eastern Michigan game. Until then, I'm Michael Rand. We'll talk to you later.